Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. Daniel Hayes rolled out of bed at 6 a.m. sharp, his internal clock as reliable as ever. He stretched, feeling the satisfying pull of muscles across his broad shoulders. The smell of coffee wafted up from the kitchen. Sophie was already up. He padded downstairs, following the aroma. Sophie stood at the counter, her auburn hair messy from sleep, clutching his steaming mug. She smiled as he entered. "Morning, handsome," she said, sliding a mug towards him. Daniel grinned, wrapping an arm around her waist and planting a kiss on her forehead. "Morning, beautiful. Sleep well." Sophie nodded, but her eyes darted away quickly. Daniel frowned slightly, but brushed it off. She was probably just tired. "Big day today," he said, sipping his coffee. "Johnson's account's closing should be a nice boost to our bottom line." Sophie hummed in response, her attention on her phone. Daniel cleared his throat. "Also, don't forget dinner tonight. Anniversary and all that," he said with a wink. Sophie looked up, her green eyes widening slightly. "Oh, right, of course. How could I forget?" She laughed, but it sounded forced to Daniel's ears. He studied her for a moment. Something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Shaking his head, he drained his mug and headed upstairs to shower. As the hot water cascaded over him, Daniel's mind wandered. He thought about his father, the stern ex-military man who drilled the importance of discipline and hard work into him from a young age. Those lessons had served him well, propelling him to the top of his field as a financial analyst. He thought about Sophie, her free-spirited nature, a stark contrast to his own upbringing. Her parents had been globetrotters, never staying in one place too long. It had taken time for Sophie to adjust to the stability Daniel craved, but he'd thought they'd found a happy medium. Lately, though, something felt different. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie was pulling away, becoming more distant. He pushed the thought aside. They were happy. They had to be. Dressed in his sharpest suit, Daniel headed downstairs. Sophie was nowhere to be seen, probably in her home office working on a design project. He called out a goodbye, hearing a muffled response from upstairs. The day flew by in a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls. By 4 p.m., Daniel was wrapping up, eager to get home and surprise Sophie. He'd made reservations at her favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place downtown. As he pulled into their driveway, Daniel frowned. An unfamiliar car was parked next to his usual spot. Blue sedan, out-of-state plates. Probably one of Sophie's clients, he reasoned, though a nagging doubt tugged at the back of his mind. He entered the house quietly, not wanting to disturb Sophie if she was in a meeting. The silence that greeted him was oppressive, heavy with an unseen tension. Daniel's heart began to race, though he couldn't say why. Climbing the stairs, he heard muffled sounds coming from their bedroom. His palms grew sweaty as he approached the door. Taking a deep breath, he pushed it open. The scene before him seared itself into his memory. Sophie, tangled in her sheets with Clara, Daniel's sister? Time seemed to stop. Sophie's eyes met his. A flash of guilt quickly replaced by something else. Was that a triumph? Clara scrambled to cover herself, her face a mask of shock and fear. "What the hell is this?" Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. Sophie sat up, not bothering to cover herself. "Daniel? Save it." He cut her off. His mind raced, piecing together 1,000 little moments that suddenly made sense. The distant looks, the hushed phone calls, the way Clara always seemed to be around lately. Clara found her voice. "Brother, please, we can explain." Daniel laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Explain? There's nothing to explain. I see it all perfectly clear." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times. "You know, I just sent your husband a video of you two. Funny how technology works, isn't it?" The color drained from Clara's face. "You what?" She stammered. Sophie's smirk faltered. "Daniel, you wouldn't." "I wouldn't what?" He snapped. "Expose your lies? Your betrayal? Why the hell not?" Clara scrambled out of bed, hastily pulling on her clothes. "You'll regret this, Daniel. I swear to God, you'll regret this." Daniel stood his ground, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "No, Clara, you'll regret this. Both of you will." Sophie finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. "Daniel, please, we can talk about this." "Talk." Daniel's laugh was hollow. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." Clara finished dressing, her eyes wild with panic. "I have to go. Lucas. Oh God, Lucas." As she rushed past Daniel, he grabbed her arm. "How long?" he demanded. Clara wrenched away. "Go to hell," she spat, then fled down the stairs. Daniel turned back to Sophie, who sat frozen on the bed. The woman he'd loved, trusted, built a life with suddenly a stranger. "I want you gone by morning," he said, his voice cold. "I don't care where you go. Just get out of my house." Without waiting for a response, Daniel turned and walked out. He made it to his car before the first tears fell, hot and angry, down his cheeks. As he drove away, his mind already turning to thoughts of revenge, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel slammed the car door shut, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. The events of the past hour played on repeat in his mind, each replay stoking the fire of his anger. He drove aimlessly, not ready to face the emptiness of a hotel room or the pitying looks of friends. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel found himself outside Jake's bar. The neon sign flickered, a beacon in the growing darkness. He parked and walked in, the familiar smell of stale beer and whiskey washing over him. Jake looked up from behind the bar, his easy smile fading as he took in Daniel's haggard appearance. "Jesus, man, you look like hell." Daniel slumped onto a bar stool. "I feel like it too." Jake poured whiskey without asking and slid it across the bar. "What happened?" Daniel downed the drink in one gulp, relishing the burn. He met Jake's concerned gaze. "Sophie. And Clara." Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Your sister Clara?" Daniel nodded, his jaw clenching. "Caught them. Together." "Shit." Jake breathed. He poured another drink. "How long?" "Don't know. Don't care." Daniel growled. "It's over. All of it." Jake leaned in, his voice low. "What are you going to do?" Daniel's eyes hardened. "Make them pay." For the next hour, Daniel poured out the whole sordid tale. Jake listened, offering refills and the occasional curse. As the bar emptied, Jake flipped the sign to closed and joined Daniel at a corner table. "You need a plan," Jake said, his usually laid-back demeanor replaced by fierce loyalty. "Can't let them get away with this shit." Daniel nodded, a grim smile playing at his lips. "Oh, I've got ideas. But I need more. I need to know everything." Over the next few days, Daniel threw himself into his investigation. He called in sick to work, using the time to dig through emails, text messages, anything he could access. Each discovery was a fresh wound, revealing the depth of Sophie and Clara's betrayal. On the third day, Jake showed up at Daniel's temporary apartment with coffee and bagels. Daniel answered the door, unshaven and bleary-eyed. "You look like crap," Jake said, pushing past him into the living room. He surveyed the chaos of papers and laptops. "Find anything good?" Daniel grabbed a coffee, gulping it down. "Oh yeah, it's worse than I thought." He showed Jake the texts he'd uncovered, messages spanning months that revealed not just an affair, but a calculated effort to undermine him. Jake's eyes widened as he read. "Jesus, they've been playing you this whole time." Daniel nodded, his voice hard. "Manipulating me, making me think I was the problem." He clenched his fist. "Well, now they're going to learn what a real problem looks like." Jake looked up, concern etched on his face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to take control of the narrative," Daniel said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "They want to paint me as the fool. Let's see how they like being exposed." Over the next week, Daniel meticulously gathered evidence. He compiled emails, texts, and photos into a damning dossier. He reached out to Avery, a local journalist known for her hard-hitting exposes. Avery met him at a quiet cafe, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "This is quite a story, Mr. Hayes," she said, flipping through the file. "Are you sure you want to go public with this?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "Absolutely. They don't get to hide in the shadows anymore." Avery studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll need to verify some things. But if it all checks out, we can run the story next week." As Avery left, Daniel felt a surge of satisfaction. The wheels were in motion, but he wasn't done yet. That evening, he crafted carefully worded emails to Sophie's clients, hinting at her unprofessional behavior and suggesting they might want to review their contracts. To Clara's ex-husband, Lucas, he sent a more direct message, attaching photo evidence of the affair. The responses were swift and furious. Sophie called, her voice shrill with panic. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "My clients are pulling out left and right." Daniel's voice was cold. Just making sure everyone knows the truth, Sophie. Isn't that what you wanted? No more secrets? You're ruining everything, she cried. No, Daniel cut her off. You did that when you decided to screw my sister. He hung up, blocking her number. Clara was next, her message filled with threats and pleas. Daniel, please, she begged. Lucas is threatening to take the kids. You can't do this to me. Daniel's laugh was bitter. I'm not doing anything to you, Clara. This is all you're doing. You made your bed. Now lie in it. The final piece of his plan fell into place when he received an invitation to a neighborhood barbecue. Perfect, he thought. Time for the grand finale. The day of the barbecue dawned bright and clear. Daniel arrived early, a projector and screen hidden in his car. He set up quietly, nodding to neighbors as they arrived. Sophie and Clara showed up together, their faces tight with worry. Daniel approached them, his smile razor-sharp. So glad you could make it, he said, loud enough for others to hear. I was hoping we could all talk, clear the air. Sophie's eyes darted around nervously. Daniel, please. Not here. Oh, but this is the perfect place, Daniel replied. After all, everyone here is practically family, right? As the crowd gathered, drawn by the tension, Daniel stepped up to the makeshift stage. If I could have everyone's attention, please, he called out. I have something I'd like to share. He hit play on the projector. The screen lit up with images and texts laid out in damning detail. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the extent of Sophie and Clara's betrayal became clear. Lucas pushed through the crowd, his face red with fury. You lying bitch, he yelled at Clara. How could you? Clara stumbled back, her face white. Lucas, I can explain. Explain? Lucas roared. There's nothing to explain. It's all right there. Sophie collapsed onto a nearby chair, sobs racking her body. Neighbors stared, some in shock, others with barely concealed glee at the unfolding drama. Daniel stood tall, his voice carrying over the chaos. I thought everyone should know the truth, he said. No more lies. No more manipulation. As the crowd buzzed with shocked conversations, Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd done it. He'd taken back control. Jake appeared at his side, clapping him on the back. Holy shit, man. That was intense. Daniel nodded, watching as Sophie and Clara tried to flee the judgmental stares of their neighbors. It's done, he said. They can't hurt me anymore. As the sun set on the disastrous barbecue, Daniel walked away, head held high. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, he felt free. The chains of betrayal had been broken, and he was ready to face whatever came next. The days following the barbecue passed in a blur for Daniel. He threw himself into work, finding solace in the predictability of numbers and spreadsheets. But even as he tried to move forward, the aftermath of his actions rippled through his life. One evening, as Daniel was leaving the office, his phone buzzed. Clara's name flashed on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. What do you want, Clara? His voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it once held for his sister. Daniel, please. Clara's voice cracked. Can we talk? Face to face. Daniel's jaw clenched. I have nothing to say to you. I know I messed up, Clara pleaded. But you're my brother. I've always loved you. Sophie, she clouded my judgment. Please, just give me a chance to explain. For a moment, Daniel felt a flicker of the old affection he had for his sister. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her betrayal. Love? Daniel scoffed. If that's what you call love, I want no part of it. You made your choice, Clara. Now live with it. He hung up, his hands shaking slightly. As he drove home, Daniel's mind raced. Had he gone too far? The doubt gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. They deserved everything they got. The next day, Daniel was at his desk when his assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Hayes? There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Daniel looked up, surprised to see Lucas, Clara's ex-husband, standing in the doorway. His face was a mask of barely contained fury. Lucas, Daniel said, rising from his chair. What can I do for you? Lucas strode into the office, slamming the door behind him. You can explain what the hell you think you're doing, Daniel. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I thought I was doing you a favor. Don't you think you deserve to know the truth? The truth? Lucas spat. The truth is you've ruined our lives. Clara's a mess. The kids are confused and upset. And for what? Your petty revenge? Daniel felt his anger rising. Petty? They betrayed me, Lucas. My wife and my sister. How would you have handled it? Lucas stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. I would have handled it like a man, not a scorned child throwing a tantrum. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. Get out of my office. Lucas. Now. Or what? Lucas challenged. You'll expose me too? Go ahead. I've got nothing left to lose, thanks to you. The tension in the room was palpable. For a moment, Daniel thought Lucas might take a swing at him. But then the fight seemed to drain out of the other man. You know what? You're not worth it, Lucas said, his voice heavy with disgust. You think you've won? Look around, Daniel. You're alone. Congratulations. As Lucas stormed out, his words echoed in Daniel's mind. He sank back into his chair, suddenly feeling the weight of everything he'd done. That evening, Daniel found himself back at Jake's bar. The place was busier than usual, the weekend crowd in full swing. Jake spotted him and waved him over to a quiet corner of the bar. How you holding up, man? Jake asked, sliding a whiskey across the bar. Daniel shrugged, taking a long sip. I don't know, Jake. I thought I'd feel better by now. Vindicated, you know? Jake leaned in, his voice low. Look, what they did to you is messed up. No one's arguing that. But maybe it's time to let it go. Move on. Daniel's eyes flashed. Let it go. After everything they did. I'm not saying forgive them. Jake clarified. Just don't let it consume you. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't waste it on anger. As Daniel pondered Jake's words, a commotion at the other end of the bar caught their attention. A group of people had just walked in, laughing and talking loudly. Daniel's heart sank as he recognized Sophie among them. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment, everything else faded away. Sophie's smile faltered, replaced by a look of shock and something else regret. She started to move towards him, but one of her friends grabbed her arm, steering her towards a table. Daniel turned back to Jake, his knuckles wide around his glass. I need to get out of here. Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. Go home. Get some rest. Things will look better in the morning. But as Daniel drove home, he knew sleep would be elusive. The confrontation with Lucas, Jake's advice, seeing Sophie, it all swirled in his mind. A tornado of emotions he couldn't escape. The next few weeks passed in a haze. Daniel threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, impressing his bosses and earning a promotion to team lead. But the victory felt hollow. One sunny Saturday, as Daniel was leaving the gym, he quite literally ran into someone coming around the corner. Oh, I'm so sorry, a feminine voice exclaimed. Daniel looked up, ready to brush off the apology, when he found himself staring into a pair of warm brown eyes. The woman was about his age, with curly dark hair and an easy smile. No harm done, Daniel said, managing a small smile of his own. I wasn't watching where I was going. The woman laughed, a sound that inexplicably lifted Daniel's spirits. Well, in that case, maybe we're both to blame. I'm Lila, by the way. Daniel, he replied, shaking her offered hand. Nice to meet you, Lila. They chatted for a few minutes, discovering they both worked in the same office complex downtown. As they parted ways, Daniel felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Over the next few weeks, Daniel ran into Lila several times. Each encounter left him feeling lighter, more like his old self. They grabbed coffee, talked about their work, their hobbies. Daniel found himself opening up, bit by bit. One evening, as they walked through a nearby park after dinner, Lila turned to him. Daniel, can I ask you something? He nodded, curious. Of course. Lila hesitated, then plunged ahead. What happened to you? I mean, I can tell there's some pain you're carrying. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I'm here if you need to talk. Daniel was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he took a deep breath and told her everything: the betrayal, the revenge, the aftermath. When he finished, Lila was quiet. Daniel braced himself for judgment, for her to walk away. But instead, she reached out and took his hand. Thank you for trusting me with that, she said softly. I can't imagine how much that must have hurt. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. I thought I was doing the right thing, exposing them. But now I don't know. Lila squeezed his hand. You were hurt and angry. It's understandable. But Daniel, you can't let that anger define you. You're so much more than what they did to you. As they continued their walk, Daniel felt as if a weight was lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he could see a future beyond his pain and anger. The next day, Daniel sat in his office, staring out at the Denver skyline. The city sprawled before him, full of possibilities. He thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the revenge, the consequences. And he made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. After a few rings, Clara answered, her voice cautious. "Daniel?" "Clara," he said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," Clara finally replied. "When and where?" They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. As Daniel hung up, he felt a mix of emotions, apprehension, lingering anger, but also a glimmer of something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe understanding. The next day, Daniel arrived at the coffee shop early. He chose a table in the corner, away from prying eyes. When Clara walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. She looked tired, older somehow. "Daniel," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Daniel nodded, studying his sister's face. "I'm not here to forgive you, Clara. I don't know if I ever can, but I'm tired of carrying this anger around." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you, Daniel, more than I can ever make up for. I was selfish and stupid, and I've lost everything because of it." "Why?" Daniel asked the question that had been burning inside him for months. "Why did you do it?" Clara was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I wish I had a good answer for you. I was lonely, feeling invisible in my own life. Sophie, she made me feel seen, but that's no excuse. What we did was wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Daniel absorbed her words, feeling the anger that had been his constant companion start to loosen its grip. "I can't pretend the last few months didn't happen, Clara, but I don't want to be consumed by this anymore." "What does that mean?" Clara asked, hope creeping into her voice. "It means," Daniel said slowly, "that I'm willing to try and move forward. Not as we were before, but something new. If you're willing to put in the work." Clara nodded eagerly, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes, Daniel." As they continued to talk, Daniel felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Weeks turned into months. Daniel threw himself into his new role at work, earning respect and admiration from his team. His relationship with Lila deepened, built on a foundation of trust and mutual understanding. One evening, as they sat on Daniel's balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains, Lila turned to him. "You seem different lately," she observed. "More at peace." Daniel smiled, taking her hand in his. "I feel different. I realized that holding on to anger was only hurting me. I'm not saying I've forgotten or completely forgiven, but I'm ready to focus on the future. Our future." Lila's eyes sparkled as she leaned in to kiss him. Their lips met. Daniel knew he had made the right choice. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead led him to this moment, to a love built on honesty and trust. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Daniel looked out at the city below. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the pain, the anger, the growth. And he realized that while trust, once shattered, could never be fully restored, new trust could be built. Stronger, more resilient. Daniel squeezed Lila's hand, feeling a surge of gratitude for the woman beside him and the life they were building together. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. And Daniel Hayes, once betrayed but now reborn, was ready to embrace it with open arms.